I was hesitant to go down the path of starting testosterone therapy because I knew it would be something I'd be doing for the rest of my life. I tried supplements, I tried boron, I think I mentioned that. Obviously dialed in diet and exercise. None of those worked. I was testosterone deficient. I think sometimes as a guy, you don't want to admit that to yourself. In the first 6 months on TRT, my physique has changed and looks more muscular to my eye. I have better workouts. I have more energy. I'm working out harder.
Any updates on hair loss?
Honestly, I'd probably try shaving my head bald. One of the side effects I experienced from TRT is my appetite went bonkers. I did a lot of stuff in my teenage years, including LSD, including brooms. People who jump around from intervention to intervention are people you shouldn't be paying attention to. Those people don't have any conviction for why they're doing what they're doing.
All right, Matt, here we are again for another AMA episode, Ask Matt Anything. So
yeah, I like these episodes because it doesn't require any prep work on my part. So
yeah, it's a little bit. Yeah.
Although I did see the questions in advance this time, it was interesting to me how many we got around testosterone, I think. And and people talk to me about it when I am at conferences and things like that. So I think it's been maybe not surprising, but again, interesting to me how many, I think, both men and women, this is a topic that really resonates. And also, I think, drives interesting emotions in people. I think there are a lot of men in particular who are interested in think maybe testosterone therapy is right for them. And there are also, I think, a lot who, I don't know if resent is the right word, but have a negative reaction about people who talk about being on testosterone, which is, again, maybe not surprising, but I find it interesting. I think there's from my perspective, before I went on testosterone, as I've talked about, I thought a lot about it. I was hesitant to go down the path of starting testosterone therapy because I knew it would be something I'd be doing, for the rest of my life. I think there are probably a lot of men who think it might be right for them, but also are afraid. And I mean, I was, and so then have a negative reaction when they see other people talking about it. So don't be negative. Just, if it's right for you, it's right for you. If it's not, it's not. But, it's just been sort of interesting how, different reactions that I get. It's also funny how there's a few people who know I'm on, I've now talked about it on the podcast, but who know I'm on testosterone and feel like they have to drop it into conversations.
Yeah, it's becoming a bit of like a meme almost.
Yeah, right, which is fine.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyways, we'll talk about all the testosterone stuff at the end. So if that's why you're here, you're going to have to wait till the end, or you're going to have to fast forward to the end.
Yeah, it's the timestamps. Yeah. Okay, so first question. The first series are actually on Rapamycin.
Okay.
So the first one is, I have noticed Peter Attia has talked less about Rapamycin on his podcast recently. Yeah. And that he isn't taking it anymore, I might have heard. So why do you think that is, and are you still taking it?
I've heard that too. I have not heard Peter say he's not taking it. Possible that he has. So I don't know anything about Peter, whether he's taking it or not. I haven't changed my opinion, and I don't think there's any reason to change what you're doing unless you've had a personal experience that makes you decide to stop taking it or start taking it. All of the data that I've seen that has come out, in the last year is directionally suggestive that rapamycin has benefits, at least for the same kinds of conditions that we've speculated that it might have benefits for: cognitive decline, chronic inflammatory conditions. I haven't seen any negative data that looks concerning to me. So I don't really see any reason to change what you're doing based on new data. And again, this is not directed at Peter, but I think that there are other people in the space who just try whatever the new shiny object is. Those people don't have any conviction for why they're doing what they're doing. And so they drop things, right? So I think people who jump around from intervention to intervention are people you shouldn't be paying attention to, because first of all, they're probably not data driven. And second, they don't have any conviction for what they're doing. And I would suggest you shouldn't base what you do based on what somebody else is doing who doesn't have any conviction for why they're doing it.
Okay. Well, yeah, actually, while you were talking, it dawned on me. I think during the 60-minute episode, the person interviewing him was like, "Oh, you stopped taking it because of mouth sores."
Oh, and Peter's talked about having mouth sores before, but I mean, that would be surprising to me because he kept taking it for quite a while when having the mouth sore. So again, it could be something where sometimes the way things get edited for 60 minutes or whatever isn't accurate. But I don't know. I didn't see that.
Yeah, speculating. I bet it's just because he stopped taking, he cycles it like you.
Yeah.
So maybe in mouth sores, got off it, he'll get back on it next year or something.
Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
But again, I mean, I think we should all be paying attention to new data. If new data comes out that forces you to reevaluate why you're doing what you're doing or not doing what you're not doing, great. I just don't see any reason to make changes based on an absence of data or when all of the data is continuing to support what I'm doing.
You said something about the new data in the last year or so. Has there been a decent amount of new rapamycin data?
Small studies. So again, it's a little bit hard for me to remember when the studies come out or when I first learned about them, because sometimes I learn about things before they come out. But, the studies around brain volume, cerebral blood flow, the chronic fatigue syndrome study that I covered, all directionally suggestive that rapamycin has benefits in those populations. And then I'm aware of quite a bit of unpublished data, not all of which is positive, by the way. Again, I'm not at liberty to talk about it at this point, but there is some data out there that I think within a certain group in certain use cases might suggest that people in that group for that use case won't want to be taking rapamycin. Again, I'll talk more about it once the study's published.
Okay, well, next question, still on rapamycin. So the user said, guys, tell me one thing. Taking into account that rapamycin impacts circadian rhythm and the timing of rapamycin, supplementation can affect the natural, normal pattern of that circadian rhythm. What is the best time of day to take it, in the morning or in the evening? Meaning, by taking it in one of those specific time points, is it better for mTOR to be suppressed in the daytime or the nighttime? A different user replied with their opinion saying, morning, it can be very energizing. You don't want to interrupt your sleep. And somebody else said, some studies report it disturbs their sleep. Or sorry, some people report it may disturb their sleep.
Yeah. So I think from the person who says it can be very energizing and the other person who says some people report it disrupts their sleep, those are sort of anecdotal reports. I guess my only comment would be careful not to believe what some rando on the internet says, right? So maybe true, maybe not. The level of certainty that the person who said that it's very energizing, I would just push back on that a little bit and say there's no evidence to actually support that. Okay. So what do we know about rapamycin and circadian rhythms? I don't know of any evidence in humans. And again, there are lots of people who've been taking high doses of rapamycin for organ transplant rejection. Even in that population, I don't know of any evidence that rapamycin either strengthens circadian rhythms or disrupts circadian rhythms or has an impact on sleep. So I would suggest it probably doesn't have a large effect. There is animal data that in the context of aging, circadian rhythm regularity declines and strength of circadian rhythms declines. There's some evidence that rapamycin can attenuate or maybe even partially reverse that in animals. Again, I don't know of any data in humans. So at this point, I would suggest that if rapamycin has an effect on circadian rhythm, it's probably in the context of attenuating age-related sleep changes. So you might see an improvement in sleep quality. And I don't know of anybody personally who has ever told me that it impacts their sleep. I take rapamycin in the morning, not for a sleep reason. That's just when I'm going to remember to take it. But I doubt it's going to have much of an effect. Having said that, there are people who are susceptible to placebo effect. So if you're taking rapamycin or other supplements at night and it's in your head that they might affect your sleep, it might affect your sleep and have nothing to do with the supplement. So
okay, very reasonable. Okay, next question. Does a 48-hour water fast every week provide the same or better or worse longevity gains as pulsing rapamycin? Would exercising during a 48-hour fast reactivate mTORC1 and negate the benefit? Same for pulsing rapamycin.
So, right, a few things to say. I mean, I've said this before. Again, there is a misunderstanding of the basic science literature around rapamycin and fasting. So we're just going to talk about laboratory animals for now. In laboratory animals, rapamycin is a longevity intervention. It increases lifespan, slows biological aging, improves a variety of health span metrics. In laboratory animals, there is little to no evidence that fasting is a longevity intervention unless it is also calorically restriction. So just get that up front. Rapamycin, good animal data that it slows aging. Fasting, essentially no data that it slows aging independent of caloric restriction. Having said that, fasting will inhibit mTOR, so it is reasonable to speculate that there will be overlapping effects, in this case, talking about a 48-hour water fast compared to a single acute weekly dose of rapamycin, let's say 6 milligrams once a week. So the question I think fundamentally is, to what extent would 48-hour water fast be the same as taking 6 milligrams of rapamycin once a week? Both will inhibit mTOR for sure. Fasting will do a lot of other things that 6 milligrams of rapamycin won't. So fasting is going to have much broader effects biologically than rapamycin. So overlapping, but distinct. I would believe that a 48-hour fast is enough to have many of the same anti-inflammatory effects as rapamycin. And if we believe that those anti-inflammatory effects are driving many of the benefits that people receive, it makes sense to me you might get the same benefits. So I don't know of any data directly comparing the two, but that seems reasonable. Now, this question about exercise is interesting, and it's one, we've touched on before, and I just don't think we have a ton of good data. So certainly fasting or 6 milligrams of rapamycin would be expected to acutely attenuate new muscle synthesis. So it's not going to stop new muscle synthesis, but it will turn down mTOR, and that will reduce new muscle synthesis. So that's going to happen in the short term. I think as long as you're getting enough protein and enough nutrients, it's probably not going to have an impact in the long term. So again, my speculation is, for somebody who's just starting resistance training, let's say, right, where you get a lot of those new gains, right? If you're doing a once weekly 48-hour water fast, or you're taking rapamycin once a week, you might see a slower increase in muscle mass than you would if you weren't doing that. My guess is over the long run, it's not going to have an impact. You'll eventually get to the same body composition, but it might slow things down. So we don't have a lot of data, but that's kind of where I land right now.
Okay, so that is actually it for all the rapamycin questions. So, again, why don't we get a lot of those? Maybe we'll have to do a separate AMA in the future. So the next one's actually about your sleep schedule. So the user said, why does Matt wake up so early? Does his sleep schedule have an impact on his hormone levels? Could modifying his schedule improve his sleep quality and heart rate variability, HRV?
Yeah. So again, anything's possible. I think it's, first of all, why do I get up so early? I am definitely a morning chronotype. My genetics back it up. My life experience backs it up. So I think there is a natural predisposition that people have for whether you are a morning person or a evening person, right? So I'm a morning person for sure. It works for me. Getting up at 4:30 a.m. We're in the Pacific time zone. That's already 7:30 in the East Coast. So it works well with meetings and things like that. It also works well with my lifestyle. I get up, do some exercise, have a shower, can have some coffee, plenty of time to get into the office and get going with my day. So I'm very doubtful that getting up at 4:30 in the morning has an impact on hormone sort of levels overall. Again, anything's possible, but that seems really unlikely. I don't know why the person is worried about my sleep quality and HRV. My sleep quality is good.
Yeah.
My HRV is good. So I don't know where that came from, but I really don't think that sleep schedule is having much of an impact on my overall health in general. I will say perturbations to sleep schedule because of my travel recently certainly could be having an impact on my health, and definitely my sleep quality during travel, I think like most people, is not as good as it is when I'm at home on a routine. So I think that's probably a bigger impact than, being on a routine where I get up at 4:30 in the morning and go to bed somewhere between 9 and 10 at night, right? That seems to work pretty well for me. And I will say, just as an aside, we might have touched on this in the last episode as well. I don't know why, but my jet lag the last couple of trips has been a lot worse. Like this most recent trip coming back from Mauritius, it was a 12-hour difference in time zones, and I was there for almost a week. And boy, it really 3-4 days, it stuck with me, which is pretty rare for me. Usually I just bounce right back. So again, I don't know, maybe I should have megadosed creatine or something, but, I'm back now. All good.
Do you wake up at 4:30 every day or just on the weekdays?
I don't intentionally get up at 4:30 on weekends, and usually I'll sleep in. So Tammy's much more likely to be up at the normal time, whereas sometimes on the weekends I'll sleep in until 6:30.
Okay.
Just don't set an alarm. Just go with it.
See, I'm 4 a.m. as well, Monday through Friday. But on the weekends, I'll still do probably 4:30. I just try not to have too much of a change and that sort of lag. But also my HRV and testosterone, that's all fine as well. But
yeah, again, I don't think getting up early is going to have an impact on hormones. I think if you are perpetually sleep deprived, that could, but I'm not perpetually sleep deprived. So it's a different issue.
A good time. All right. So the next series of questions are all sort of around supplements or future episode related to supplements. So the first one is, so are you back on creatine? If so, how much? And this is from the creatine and kidney episode you did.
Yeah. I take 5 grams of creatine a day. I am very consistent. Every once in a while, I'll forget. Actually, on this most recent trip, I did bring creatine with me. So I just, filled up a pill bottle with creatine and my white powder. And I figured if they asked, it wouldn't be a big deal. So yeah, I take 5 grams a day. And I don't see any reason to stop doing that. But I also, recognize creatine makes a sense. It's a tier 1 supplement in my view, and it is not going to move the lever on health like eat, move, sleep, connect, hormones, and, the foundational stuff that really has a big impact.
Okay, great. From that same episode, somebody asked, this is a great video format and idea. Astaxanthin next, ?
Yeah, astaxanthin, you're right. I need to do a deep dive on astaxanthin. Super interesting molecule, pretty good data. So yes, agreed. Put that on the list.
I saw a number of comments about glycine. So this person said, when is the episode on glycine coming?
Yeah, glycine too. That came out of the interventions testing program. There's interesting data there. Yes, I'll put it on the list. Honestly, I struggle a little bit with getting too excited about glycine. It's an amino acid, but I should just, do a deep dive on. Maybe I'll do both of those in the same episode.
There we go. I don't take many supplements, but I happen to take all 3 of these. So I don't know. We'll see. Next question. How do I get in contact with Dr. Brad Youngren to get the plasma exchange therapy?
Yeah. So Brad was on the podcast, CEO, Circulate Health. I don't have permission to give out Brad's email and phone number on YouTube, so I won't do that. But I will say you can go to the Circulate website, www.circulate.health. They have a form there for contact. That's probably the best way to do it.
Great. Are they all over US or?
So Circulate is the company that puts the devices into clinics, right? So they have clinical partners around the United States. I don't think they're in all 50 states yet, but they have clinical partners around the United States where you can get access to Circulate devices, and every clinic that offers therapeutic plasma exchange through Circulate also employs the nurses that actually do the procedure. So they have expertise in the people who are actually doing the procedure. Okay. But I believe on their website they have a map of where their clinics are at, and I think they can actually help you get scheduled at a clinic near you if you want to do therapeutic plasma exchange.
Okay.
I know we've got 2 in the Seattle area.
Yeah. So a couple questions on hyperbaric oxygen chamber therapy. So this first one is there good data on HBOT and brain health?
Yeah, first of all, brain health is super interesting topic and important topic to begin with. So we've been thinking a lot about brain health here at Optispan, and I would say hyperbaric oxygen therapy has some evidence for improvements in brain health in very specific contexts. So I think there are cases where it clearly is beneficial. And those are cases where you have hypoxia in regions of the brain. So like carbon monoxide poisoning or decompression sickness, where there's these nitrogen bubbles build up in microcapillaries and prevent oxygen flow to certain parts of the brain. Even certain infections that can cause hypoxia in the brain. There, hyperbaric oxygen therapy can be beneficial, mostly because it is going to provide more oxygen to those regions of the brain that are deficient in oxygen. So definite yes there. Concussion, traumatic brain injury. I think there are some suggestive studies that have shown benefits on cognitive performance. These kinds of studies are complicated to do well. So if you think about trying to do a placebo-controlled study for something like hyperbaric oxygen therapy, what's your placebo going to be? You're going to put them in the device and make them, how are you going to make them believe that they're under pressure, right? So it's hard to do those studies really well. And the studies that have tried, they call it sham procedures, generally don't show any additional benefit from hyperbaric oxygen on top of sham, but the sham shows some benefit. So it's a little bit hard to know. Maybe it's just something about, the being in the clinic and feeling like you're doing a complicated, fancy procedure. I don't know. But, so I would say, maybe there. And then, if you think about stroke or dementia, animal models, the data looks good. So mouse models, you can find evidence that hyperbaric oxygen therapy is good. Again, in humans, I would say there's nothing that rises to the level of, really solid clinical trials. It's fairly preliminary. And that's also where I'd put the sort of longevity health span uses of hyperbaric oxygen therapy. As far as I know, there's no animal data for hyperbaric oxygen slowing aging or increasing lifespan convincingly in mice. In fact, there's actually better data for hypoxia, so low oxygen, increasing lifespan in animal models. So it's a little bit, counterintuitive, maybe both. Who knows? Maybe it depends on how you do it. I've talked to a lot of docs and people who claim they feel better after doing hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So I believe there's reality there. But as we've sort of just touched on, how much of it is the hyperbaric oxygen? How much of it is the fact that you're going in this device, you're in a clinic, if you feel like you're doing something science fiction like, hard to tease apart. To me, honestly, right now, and again, I'm always open to more quality data. Right now, it feels more like a shiny object that the docs who are enthused by shiny objects like to use, without a lot of really strong data supporting benefits, broadly speaking, across the population.
Okay.
But I'm certainly open to the possibility that there are those kinds of benefits.
Okay. Have you tried it before?
I have not tried I want to. I just haven't, put on the list of lots of things Matt needs to try. Yeah. So I guess I should, that's actually important to point out. I'm speaking from a position of having not done it myself.
Yeah. Okay. Do you know how long you're supposed to be in it at any given time?
There's a bunch of protocols for how long and how often you do it. So I don't know if there is, I don't think there's anybody settled on like what is the standard protocol at this point. Different clinics do different things. And there's all sorts of fancy other stuff you can do on top of hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So
cool. Yeah. With two young kids and being very busy, I just think about the opportunity cost of driving there, being in the machine for an hour plus. And again, I'm not sure how long it is, but for a potential little bit of benefits. So. All right, so next question. So this comes from Better Alternatives to Biological Aging reel we did on Instagram. So Matt, how do you compare the health implications of epigenetics versus those singular indicators? The former is the genotype portion of a person, whereas any of those indicators is just a single parameter of his phenotype at incomparable scales. The problem is the current lack of the full understanding of epigenetics as related to aging. Of course, those indicators done all together may tell a fuller picture, but still not as accurate as the epigenetic blueprint.
Okay. There's a lot there. So I think the way I would frame it is epigenetics is not necessarily unique. So it seems like this commenter is coming from the position that epigenetics are unique in the sense that they tell us something about the entire genome. And in an extent, that's true. But really, you can get a similar dimensionality of data from things like metabolome, proteome, transcriptome. So transcriptome is looking at the gene, how the genes are expressed. And all of those can be used to build, clocks that are equivalent or better to the current generation of epigenetic clocks at predicting chronological age, mortality risk for sure. So I don't think there's anything unique about epigenetics per se as a tool for assessing overall health status or estimating biological age. I would also say I agree with the point that any of those, when you have, hundreds of things you can look at out of tens of thousands of things you could choose from, to create these correlations, are going to be better than a single data point, insulin or LDL or grip strength, right? All of them are going to do better than a single data point. I do believe that if you were to take multiple functional measures across multiple domains, so like, components of cognitive assessments, components of strength, agility, flexibility, body composition, cardiovascular health, right? Respiratory function. I think if you did that and you created a composite functional aging clock, you could probably do as well as you can with the current epigenetic clocks or transcriptome clocks, with the added value, in my view, that those functional metrics are much more informative about what really matters at this point. So I would lean more towards, and that's really what we do at Optispan. We don't boil it all down to a single number, right? Because I think it's not helpful at this point to try to boil it down to a single number for most people. So I think those are important because then they tell you functionally where you're at and where to focus your efforts going forward. And then the last thing I would say is I think the clinical chemistry clocks, and we've talked about lineage before, that use, common blood-based measurements and analytes that are found in urine to predict mortality risk, are also quite intriguing, perform as well as the epigenetic clocks in terms of predicting mortality, at least in these population studies. Again, with the added value you don't get from epigenetics, which is that we know what those markers mean. We know what insulin means. We know what lipid levels mean, ApoB, right? And we know how to move them either with lifestyle or medications or in rare cases, supplements in a way that is predicted to reduce mortality. So again, they're actionable in a way that the epigenetic clocks currently aren't. I would agree with, I think, one of the pieces of what the commenter said, which is that we don't understand yet how the epigenetics are connected to mortality risk or aging biology. I think if we get there where we can say these specific epigenetic marks are regulating these genes and these genes are affecting aging in this way, that will give myself and many other people a lot more confidence in the epigenetic clocks and make them more actionable if we actually get to the point where we understand those mechanisms.
Okay. So does it sound correct that maybe the ultimate lineage 2 would have also some functional biomarkers in there as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it certainly could. Again, it depends a little bit on what your goal is. If your goal is to have the best predictor of mortality, you might not need those functional measures. If your goal is to get the best sort of holistic picture that you can of a person's, current health status, future disease risk, future mortality risk, quality of life, I think you definitely want those functional metrics. In fact, you even probably want things more beyond the functional metrics. You want to understand what their mental health is like and what their relationships are like, because all of that feeds into quality of life. So again, it depends a little bit on what your end goal is. If you want to get to an app where you can give people a single number, sure, you're not going to deal with the complicated reality of humanity. But if you want to help people, I think, yeah, that's probably a better tool to incorporate all of those dimensions of that go into a real quality life.
I think often too about how much they correlate the functional molecular biomarkers. Like, is there someone out there top 5% of muscle mass and cardiovascular fitness, but yet their biomarkers are a mess?
Yeah.
They're diabetic
well, I mean, that can happen in general. Again, most of the correlations are at the population level. And the reason those correlations work is because in most people, they're going to go in that direction, right? It depends a little bit on the biomarkers. I think you and I both know, because we've had people in our program like this. There are people who can be super dialed in with nutrition and exercise and maybe even sleep, yet they don't have any friends, right? So their connect pillar is really weak. So it may or may not show up in the standard biomarkers. Sometimes it'll show up in stress related biomarkers or inflammation related biomarkers. But from a quality of life perspective, that's a big issue for them to work on to improve their sort of overall health. Because I think, enjoying life is really an important part of being healthy, right? Yeah. So even if you have all your biomarkers dialed in, you're the best biohacker in the world. If you're miserable, what's the point?
That's a good point. It's not a common conversation in this field from what I've seen at least.
Well, yeah.
All right. So next question. Matt, I saw you speak on 2 books you were writing. I only found one reference to a manual online, but it was around $125. Could you please do a little vid about both of the books you're working on, and will you sell them directly?
Sure. So I think probably the book this person found is a book that I edited called The Handbook of the Biology of Aging. I edited that along with George Martin. It's a collection of mostly review articles in the field. So unless you really want to do a deep dive, do we have one there on the bookshelf? Yeah, that's it.
There we go.
Handbook of the Biology of Aging. Unless you want to deep dive on review articles, I mean, I probably get a little portion of the commission, so I probably shouldn't say this. I wouldn't spend my money on that book. You can find out the same thing just by listening to the Optispan podcast, or going to PubMed and finding review articles. So that's not the 2 books that I'm currently working on, which I am finally making progress on, which is great. So one of them is a book with a friend and colleague of mine, Ram Hariharan. He is a computational biologist at Northeastern. It was really his idea to do this, and he asked for my help, and I agreed. So that book is under contract with Penguin Random House. It's called The Longevity Formula. It is really a overarching view of geroscience and the biology of aging and some historical stuff written for a general audience. So hopefully this will be for people who want to understand the science of longevity in an accessible way. Hopefully there's some fun stories in there, some personalities in the field. And then the other one is a book that I'm writing on, broadly speaking, health span medicine. So the way that we think about medicine at Optispan. Some of my own journey is in there, how I got from, being an academic scientist to where I'm at now, how Optispan came about. Some of the history, but we aren't going to share all of the details, but we'll share some of the fun stories, some of the characters who helped shape our approach, and then pragmatic, real life things that people can do and apply in their own life. So I don't know when those books will be out. The one with Penguin Random House, we're due to have a complete draft first quarter of next year. So then the publication process takes the time that it takes. And then the Healthspan Medicine book, God, I hope I have a complete first draft of that by New Year. That's aggressive, but we're not so far off. And again, we'll just have to wait and see how long it takes to get that through the publication process.
Okay, so maybe mid to late 2026 is what it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, these things can take longer publishers can go really slow, so we'll just have to wait and see. But we'll have, once they're out, I'll tell you about it on the podcast, and we'll have promo code Matt.
Yeah, there we go. All right, so next question. A typical topic which keeps coming up is microplastics. Can you guys please explain what is the truth behind these claims of high levels of microplastics? Are we to throw away everything that may contaminate us? Yeah,
it's a good question. So, I mean, the reality is we know these things are in our environment. We know they're accumulating in our bodies. We really don't know how much of a problem that is from a long-term health perspective. The human body is pretty remarkable. We can deal with a lot of insults. So my guess is right now that there are certainly some people who are negatively affected by high levels of microplastics, and it can seed in different parts of the body and contribute to, atherosclerotic plaques, maybe even plaques in the brain, maybe other types of organ dysfunction. But that's probably relatively infrequent, that it causes significant harm to people. But all of that is couched in my guess, probably. I mean, I think we really don't know. My view is be pragmatic and try to take steps that you can to reduce your exposure to microplastics, but don't freak out about it. It's not going to help you to create a lot of anxiety around microplastics. And again, this is where my frustration with some of the big name influencers in this space who try to scare people into believing that everything in the food supply and everything in the air is going to kill them. Therefore, you need to buy my products to test how much you're getting and, to give you clean stuff. Like, that's just manipulating people through fear. It's dishonest. It's terrible. So don't freak out. I would also say probably most of your exposure to microplastics comes from places you may not appreciate. So, for example, I've been told that a lot of the microplastics, maybe the bulk of microplastics that people are exposed to, come from car tires.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if you live in an area next to a freeway or where there's lots and lots of car traffic, you may be getting exposed to 100 times more microplastics there than if you were to drink water from a plastic water bottle every time you drank water. So thinking about ways that you can deal with the biggest contributors to your microplastic burden is probably going to be more effective than trying to be hyper vigilant about the clothes you wear or drinking anything from plastic. Like I don't drink from plastic regularly, but if I'm out for a hike and I don't have my metal water bottle and somebody has a plastic water bottle, I'm going to drink that water and I'm not going to worry about it. So I think that's kind of the way I would approach it at this point. The other thing I would say is I would encourage people not to get freaked out by, the latest headline for the most recent study. I think there's a lot of strategic research being done these days by people who want to get high profile publications or get grants. So look, these plastics are in our environment. They're accumulating in our body. If you look hard enough, anywhere in our bodies, you're going to find them. Okay. And yet you see these big publications where people are, microplastics found in the brain of people with Alzheimer's disease. Of course, they're going to be in the brain of people with Alzheimer's disease. They're going to be in your brain. They're going to be in my brain. They're going to be everywhere. microplastics in the testicles of men who are, no longer interested in sex. You're going to find microplastics anywhere that you look. So just be careful not to fall for the hyperbolic headlines. These are, scientists doing legitimate research, but I think some of them are doing research where we already know the answer in order to create a headline or get a big publication. But the step from finding the microplastics to those actually causing the pathology or the problem is a big leap that I think a lot of people are just short-circuiting right to microplastics are causing this, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I heard about this yesterday, but it's like you hear about the number of new studies uploaded on PubMed each day. They're almost researchers are having to play a clickbait game similar to YouTube.
Yeah, you totally see that in the literature these days. Yeah, unfortunately.
Wow. Yeah. So now we have a couple of questions from the episode you did on psilocybin.
Psilocybin, yeah. Yep.
So the first one was, what is a corresponding human dosage, or can that not be surmised?
Yeah, I mean, it's always risky to go from humans to animals or animals to humans. There are formulas that are available. The authors of that paper claimed that the dose they used in the mouse study was based on a dose from human clinical trials of 25 milligrams. So, I think it's reasonable. It's obviously not going to be exact, but they tried to make the dose that they tested, relatively reasonable compared to what's been tested in some human clinical trials.
Okay. Have you tried this before?
Psilocybin. I have not tried psilocybin.
Yeah, no, I had an old client.
At least not since I was a teenager.
I had an old client who gave me some. He said, hey, try this out. I was probably, my choice of time. And then my wife Googled it and got like, no, I don't want to do it just in case.
Yeah. I did a lot of stuff in my teenage years, including LSD, including shrooms, but not as an adult. I basically stopped all of that pretty much around the time I graduated from high school.
Okay, you got it out of your system. So.
I certainly did in a big way.
Yeah, there we go. We should talk about that when the camera's off. So next one from the mushrooms episode. How about we take psilocybin because it makes life more interesting and hope, with fingers crossed, that it has a positive impact upon aging?
I mean, again, I think so. So I'm not going to suggest that people take psilocybin because it makes life more interesting. I think the philosophy of hope that it has an impact on aging is perfectly reasonable here, as well as with a lot of other stuff that we don't really know. I mean, we were just talking about the fact that I haven't done psilocybin as an adult. It's interesting because I know many people who have and who do and who some of whom feel like it's had a profound impact on their outlook on life and their mental health. Some who just enjoy it. And they ask me, like, why don't you do it? And I, my perspective is, first of all, I'm pretty happy. I don't feel like I have, depression, a lot of anxiety. I feel like I'm mentally in a pretty good place. And so from my perspective, I don't see any reason to risk screwing it up. Right. So again, I think this is partly, where you're at in your life and trying to do my own sort of rational risk reward analysis. The reward for me is even if it does have a positive impact on mental health, I'm in a good place. I don't see any reason to risk screwing that up because it might put me in a different place that isn't so good.
Okay. Yeah. Very reasonable. That was my wife's exact same approach. So last one from this episode, another NRF2 activator, just take broccoli or astaxanthin.
So we talked about astaxanthin. We'll talk about that more later. I like broccoli. Broccoli's great. If you want to eat broccoli, regardless of whether it's going to be an NRF2 activator, I'm all for it.
What's the therapeutic dose of broccoli?
That's a good question.
Okay, so here we are at the end of the episode with all the testosterone questions.
All right, let's do it.
There's the first one, it's a long one, so strap in. So, hi, Matt and crew. Thanks for the AMA. Matt is looking, to my eye, noticeably more muscular than in the past. Would he attribute this to indirect effects of TRT or even placebo or TRT? Since I'm taking it, I should,
Like I work out more to get the advantage from it. Okay.
Such as increased motivation, desire to train, ability to push weight and repetition, pain tolerance. Do you want to break it down from there?
I mean, I can tackle that one. So again, all of that could be contributing. I agree. I have definitely, my physique has changed. I haven't had a DEXA for a while. So I actually don't know from a body composition perspective how much it's changed, but certainly in the first 6 months on TRT, my muscle mass went up, as did my fat mass a little bit. My weight went up, but proportionally more muscle. But just looking in the mirror, definitely my physique has changed and looks more muscular to my eye. And I definitely attribute that to the TRT. Like, it could be the case that I have better workouts, I have more energy, I'm working out harder. I don't perceive that. I don't feel like my workouts are more intense or harder, or that I've been working out more now than I used to, but that's certainly possible. But I do think most likely it's a direct effect of the testosterone.
Okay. So frequency about the same, pre and post testosterone.
And again, I've been traveling a lot, right? And, so the workouts aren't as consistent maybe as they normally would be.
Okay.
Yeah. Frequency about the same.
Next one's intensity.
Intensity is about the same.
Time, like how much you work out per week.
No significant increase.
Then type effects, you were doing resistance training, still the same.
Yeah. Yeah. If anything, I mean, I have backed off on squats and deadlifts because it just is not good for my back. And I hear lots of people say that. I mean, I love doing deadlifts, but it's just not good for my back. So if anything, I've backed off on some of the, the heavier compound movements. So yeah, I would definitely say it's not an increase though in those types of exercises.
And if you were in a calorie surplus, it was not on purpose. You increased.
No, but I think I may have talked about this. That is definitely one of the side effects I experienced from TRT is my appetite went bonkers. Like I was hungry all the time for the first 6 to 8 months. Even still, my appetite is up, but my diet's also pretty clean. So I may be in a little bit of a calorie excess, but it's not. It's also foods that are high in fiber, and so probably, it's okay. But yeah, definitely my appetite went up. I put on, I'm probably up 15 pounds from when I started TRT.
Wow. And do you train every muscle equally? Like you train, because you got good arms. Do you treat your arms as equal as your legs or? No,
definitely. Since I backed off on squats and deadlifts, I don't train legs as hard as I do my upper body, at least not in dedicated resistance training. So we've talked about how I'll go out and do stairs and things like that, but I don't do a lot of lifts dedicated for legs. Depends a little bit on where I'm at. So I don't have equipment in my gym to do real hard, heavy leg exercises if I'm not going to do squats or deadlifts. So yeah, if anything, it's been more upper body than lower body.
Okay, we were talking about this off camera, but it's just kind of funny because on some episodes, Matt would be like, our comments would be like, wow, Matt's so jacked, hulking out, whatever. Yeah. And then the next episode that might have been filmed the same day, people would be like, oh, what happened? He looks skinny now. And it's just the magic of camera angles, lighting.
Yeah.
It
all right, guys.
Change.
Here we go.
Oh, here we go.
What do you think? How's that look?
We could edit that a little bit.
Yeah, let's do some Photoshop.
Yeah. All right. Next question related to testosterone. Hi, Matt. Any updates that you might have on hair loss with now taking T? Did you want to start there or go?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, again, I don't really know. I do feel like when I first started testosterone, there was some hair thinning. But look, I'm at the age where that's going to happen. And I mean, I don't do anything for cosmetic purposes. I don't do hair transplant. Like I haven't done any of that stuff. So I don't know if it's the testosterone or not. I perceived that there was hair thinning when I first went on testosterone. That hasn't accelerated. It hasn't changed. So I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. And if you did notice, you'd probably just hop on finasteride, or you'd look into it, because that would probably counteract any of the increased DHT from testosterone.
Maybe. Yeah. Again, I don't know. Honestly, I'd probably try shaving my head bald and see how I look as a bald guy.
Okay. There we go.
Just because I don't want to deal with it. Like if I could get away with not having any hair and not having to deal with getting a haircut, which I need right now. Great.
You're very Spartan and minimalist. Like just the idea of like there's shampoo and just easier morning routine.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I'm sure that stuff, it works incrementally, right? But I don't know how much of it is really going to have a large impact. I don't know.
Okay. So part 2 of this person's question was, did you notice any change in your blood work pre and post testosterone?
Yeah. So I'll go through, I should do a more detailed dive into that. So definitely when I went on testosterone, it was clear that I had what's called primary hypogonadism, which is where the pituitary is working fine, so it's making a lot of FSH and LH. That signal is not causing the production of testosterone in the testes. So people have asked, like, why don't you go on HCG? That works potentially if you have secondary hypogonadism, where it's a pituitary problem. But in my case, that's not going to help. So when I went on testosterone, FSH and LH went down. That makes sense because your body now has plenty of testosterone. I also had high SHBG, sex hormone binding globulin, which will bind up testosterone so that it reduces your free testosterone. That also has gone down since I went on testosterone. The only kind of adverse, so there's 2 things that have changed that I would describe as potentially negative changes in blood work. One is my HDL has gone down. That's pretty atypical in my understanding on testosterone. So it might be something about me. My HDL has gone down and my hematocrit has gone up. That's a very common side effect of testosterone. And the concern there is if your hematocrit gets too high, it puts you at a higher risk of stroke. Turns out in my case, I don't have any other risk factors for stroke. My platelets are actually relatively low normal. I have, low to normal blood pressure. So I don't think the hematocrit is a big concern in my case, but that is something to pay attention to if you're on testosterone therapy.
And just to add, like in the bro science circles I'm in, crushed HDL seems very common for people on testosterone therapy, at least anecdotally. So
yeah, and again, it may be a dose thing and sensitivity, right? So yeah, and but that definitely was something that changed in my blood work.
Okay, and are you doing anything to, I guess, counteract that, or?
I don't really know what to do. My diet's really clean. Yeah, and I mean, I exercise regularly, so I don't really have any obvious way to modify that other than coming off testosterone, which I'm not going to do. Maybe reducing testosterone. So maybe try dialing it in a little bit more. I am going to start. So I've been doing twice weekly injections. I am going to start trying to do daily. So lower dose. So you don't get as much of a peak and then drop off, and see if that has any impact. I've talked to people who say that sometimes helps with at least the hematocrit changes. So we'll see there. But yeah, I'm not sure what to do with the HDL. Another thing, don't think I've talked about this on the podcast. My ApoB has always been high. Lp(a) is high, not high, but high normal, which is too high for optimal. So I about a month ago started Rapatha, which is the PCSK9 inhibitor. I'm not on a statin, so I'm interested to see what effect that has on my lipids overall and whether that does anything to HDL. It should bring down LDL. It should bring down ApoB. Okay, but we'll see.
I saw one YouTuber commenting about, especially if you're growing daily now, that would it be advantageous to switch to insulin needles just because you have a smaller needle? Because you're already on a small dose and you're going from twice a week to once a day. It might be.
Yeah. Again, I don't have any problem with the needles now. Again, that was like an issue, before I started testosterone and why I started with the oral. And then, the oral had a bunch of side effects that weren't great. Why I went to the injectable. And then once I just made that switch, it's like not a big deal.
You don't mind it. Okay.
Yeah. So again, I think there's that initial. And this is interesting. There were two hurdles I think that I had to get over in my testosterone journey.
Yeah.
One was just making the psychological adjustment that, first of all, I needed it, right? That I was testosterone deficient. I think sometimes as a guy, you're like, you don't want to admit that to yourself. And that it was something I would need to do for the rest of my life. If I decided to do it and it worked in terms of all of the benefits, that I would continue doing it for the rest of my life. So that was number one. And so it took me a while. I tried things. I tried supplements. I tried boron. I think I mentioned that. Obviously dialed in diet and exercise. None of those worked. So then I made that, got past that psychological hurdle. And then the other was this question of injections. And so I think we talked about this before, but, I started on Jatenzo, the oral form. That led to a lot of water retention, was not great. Didn't really want to do a gel or a cream. And so then went to injections. And it was really Kevin White who convinced me to go to injections. He was like, hey, man, it's easy. I'll show you. And he did. And I was like, oh, that's easy. So, yeah, okay. So that was the other, psychological thing. Just had to get over that, fear of injecting yourself, regularly. And now it's like no big deal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not an expert on this, but just talking to my former clients, the way you did it is exactly how I would recommend or how I would have done it, or how I might do it when I'm 50 plus. So I think you handled it all with the data and with the age you were. It seems like a logical way of doing it.
Right. Yeah. And so, I guess my advice, again, this is my personal experience, right? I can say absolutely no regrets, outside of maybe even including the pillars. This is a big lever you can pull if you are hormonally dysregulated, man or woman, right? So take a look. Don't be scared. If you need it, it will have a big impact on your health.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of Instagram ads out there where you click it. Even someone like me, 34, with good testosterone, if I fill it out, it'll say, yes, you need it.
Yeah, right. That's the problem, right? I think there are challenges on both ends, right? One, there's still a little bit of stigma. A lot of people who've been scared about the risks of hormone therapy, both men and women. I think those risks are greatly overblown as long as it's done responsibly and well. But then you have all the irresponsible people out there who are just giving out hormones like they're candy without any sort of blood work or any sort of medical workup, or people who are sourcing these things illegally, right? Outside of healthcare. So yeah, it's kind of unfortunate that it seems like those extremes get amplified and the people who are doing it well, in the middle, don't get amplified, but that's just the reality of the situation. Find yourself a good doc. There's a growing number of docs who have expertise in hormone therapy, both for men and women. Do it right. Again, from my experience, I have no regrets. And so good decision on my part.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for sharing. That's it for today's AMA.
Thank you. Yep, it's been fun. As always, if you guys have any questions, I'm pretty much an open book. I'll tell you what I think. Feel free to ask. I enjoy being able to share my opinions and knowledge with you. So thanks for watching the Optispan podcast. As always, if you're not yet a subscriber, please click that subscribe button. If you have any questions, leave them below, and they might just show up on the next Ask Matt Anything episode of the Optispan podcast.
Great. Thank you.